When I first started this series in 2019, I was working in events and festivals full-time, meaning I would catch the overnight 12-hour train between Melbourne and Sydney on a frequent basis. One night I was coming home and decided to put on the movie Stone Cold, thinking it would be a brainless action movie that I could fall asleep to. Instead, I found one so meticulously silly that I had to stay awake and make notes about it until I passed out on the train. Now, a couple of nights ago, I had just finished watching Charlie's Angels Full Throttle with my roommates and decided to go to bed, couldn't get to sleep and thought, you know what? Why don't I try the third Charlie's Angels film? Surely, that's not going to be a film that's going to keep me up with a desire to make a whole bunch of notes on.
But that's not the way it happened.
Ho, 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 ho. Delightfully devilish, Seymour.
Welcome back, everybody, and today I'm going to be talking about a film that you probably forgot about the existence of, with Charlie's Angels, directed by Elizabeth Banks and released in 2019, in the long ago period of before the COVID pandemic. To summarize my relationship with the Charlie's Angels franchise, I've never watched the TV series or the reboot TV series, but the original 2000 film directed by McG has always held a very special place in my heart. I watched it at a very young age, during a time when my adolescent male self in a patriarchal society was very much not a fan of female-focused narratives, but since this one featured Drew Barrymore and Cameron Diaz, who were frequent faces in a number of films I was a fan of, and because seeing girls as action heroes instead of as romantic fodder was a refreshing change of pace, I was pleasantly surprised. When I really began discovering movies in my teenage years, I rewatched it and called it a 9 out of 10. It was funny, sexy, and loaded to the brim with cartoonish action, all of which I agreed with. I was never really a fan of Full Throttle though, but about 10 years later, I've decided to move into a new place with a number of friends, and we decided that to christen this space, our first movie screening would be the original Charlie's Angels. And that film has lost none of its charm. Now that I'm older, I can see it as a product of its time, for better and for worse. It's rather heavily sexualized and very much subject to the male gaze, but it leans into this for campy fodder, and the three angels deliver truly unforgettable starring roles. And with Drew Barrymore producing the movie herself, it was the product of her success. Rewatching the sequel, I really enjoyed the first half because it had the same manic energy, but eventually it wore off and I just kept waiting for the convoluted mess of a film to actually come to an end. These movies came from a time when action cinema was constantly trying to copy The Matrix, and while some didn't do it very well, others did. And both of these movies deliver plenty of kick-ass action, even if the second one leans a bit heavily into mediocre CGI. After Full Throttle, I don't really think anyone was clamoring for more Charlie's Angels, and considering the 2011 TV series was cancelled after 4 episodes and didn't get a single positive review on Rotten Tomatoes, I think that kind of reinforces that idea. But in 2019, along comes Elizabeth Banks. And to her credit, I like her. She's more than a capable director, she is funny, but I really also think that no one wanted to see just another reboot or requel that nobody was asking for, and 2019 was one of the years where we were seeing a lot of that starting to take off in Hollywood. Also, I want to talk about the casting of the angels in this film. Lupita Nyong'o, Emma Stone, Jennifer Lawrence, and Margot Robbie all turned down roles in the movie, and I think any of them would have been great. The cast that we ended up getting do more than a solid job, but I also think that the star power they carry isn't really much of an attraction. The angels we had in the early 2000s films were pretty huge for the time. Cameron Diaz was a leading lady in Hollywood for many years, Drew Barrymore had been a star since childhood and was on a warpath back to the Hollywood forefront, and Lucy Liu made a breakthrough as an action star, which led to, among other roles, her iconic part in Kill Bill Volume 1. For the Elizabeth Banks version, we've got these stars. First of all, even though she was great in the smaller drama movies Camp X-Ray and Still Alice in the years leading up to this movie, we've got Kristen Stewart, who is arguably still most synonymous with the Twilight franchise at the time.
Hoo-wee! Whoa! Oh! You know, I never walk out of a movie, but yuck!
And as much as Stewart evolved beyond the Twilight franchise in the years leading up to this movie, and in the years since, she's an Oscar nominee now, I still wouldn't necessarily consider her a major draw for a Hollywood blockbuster. Secondly, you have Naomi Scott, who I should remember from both the new Power Rangers movie and the live-action Aladdin, if not for the fact that nearly all the characters from the former were forgettable, whilst the latter was a movie I immediately forgot about after watching it. So again, not a major draw, and considering the fact that she wouldn't actually have another acting role in the 5 years following this movie, aside from a supporting role in Notes on a Scandal, she's really not done much to keep herself in the limelight and stay as a draw in Hollywood, although she did recently get a lot of critical acclaim for her role in Smile 2. Rounding out the cast is newcomer Ella Balinski, who I can only say I've seen in literally nothing else. I respect the decision to bring in a young blood, but again, it's just not a draw. Allegedly, Charlie's Angels went through 30 rewrites during production, and Kristen Stewart herself said that she hated making this movie. It came and went with little fanfare, mixed reviews, and was considered to be one of the biggest box office disappointments of 2019. In fact, after the abysmal opening weekend, the studio actually slashed the marketing budget from $100 million to $50 million. It had a few people talking about it at the time, but it's been forgotten about the cultural zeitgeist in the years since. Now that I've stumbled across it, I want to talk about it, but I also want to point out that according to Wikipedia, this is the third movie in the Charlie's Angels series and is meant to be a continuation of the narrative, wrapping the series up as a trilogy. And yet it has the same title as the first Charlie's Angels movie.
Well, that sucks.
I think women can do anything.
Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just sat down.
When that is literally the first line of dialogue in your film, you're setting the audience up with a particular expectation, and you're going to learn pretty quickly with this film, it doesn't really try to go against that expectation.
Just because they can doesn't mean they should, right? Think about women fixing cars, driving a taxi, installing some drywall.
Why not?
No. Look, trust me, a girl like you don't really want this.
We're opening this action thriller with a nice round of loud chauvinism. How exciting. The film starts with Kristen Stewart's character Sabina out with some rich playboy who keeps reminding her that women are inferior and he is peak male.
I chose to make you notice me.
That is not your choice, Sabina. That is God's gift to you.
And immediately, I'm over it.
But don't you think it's sort of what you do with those gifts that really matters? Every one of us. Men, women. We all just want to fulfill our potential, live our heart's desires.
Nobody is on the other side of this issue.
I agree women can do anything. I think Kristen Stewart is slick and seductive while showing off her physical prowess, but the script gives her lines like this.
Did you know
What?
It takes men an additional 7 seconds to perceive a woman as a threat compared to a man.
We're not even 4 minutes in, and Charlie's Angels has already insisted on hammering gender politics into the script with the subtlety of Homer Simpson's electric hammer.
Probably needs to be more powerful.
A very average action scene begins as two of the angels kick everyone's ass, and the film quickly cuts between each shot before we have a moment to really appreciate what's going on. It's not incomprehensible, but it's not particularly impressive.
You stole aid money, women, and children, refugees.
We get it, he's a bad guy, put down the electric hammer.
You swiped right. I'm your girlfriend now.
She ain't funny. Next!
The angels acquire a bunch of items from the safe before Bosley comes in, played by Patrick Stewart.
Oh, Professor X.
So that's 4 months surveillance, 2 countries, and the most embarrassing date I have ever been on in my life.
Is it though, Kristen Stewart? Because I remember these photos.
But the question is, Johnny, who are you?
Rather than answering that question, the mission ends before we get a montage of diverse women and girls all over the world, for really no narrative purpose whatsoever.
Any diverse women in it, make it clap.
Also, the song playing in this scene feels like very generic action movie fodder. I would have thought something paying tribute to the campy roots of the franchise might be more appropriate, like a variation of the actual Charlie's Angels theme, but whatever. And then 1 year later, we've got a new face, and another male character designed to be dislikable with everything he says.
The time is now. And that's what I told Mr. Brock, and he agrees with me, obviously. Elena, thank you so much for coming in. I love how this conversation went.
And when a film spends so much time making its characters annoyingly unlikable, it really doesn't make for a pleasant viewing. We are only 10 minutes in so far, but we are not off to a great start.
Well, technically I haven't said anything yet.
Oh, let's not get caught in a game of who said what, right?
You know, as much as these characters do reflect a lot about negative male behavior in society, this film seems to detest exploring that with any kind of subtlety whatsoever. New Girl keeps talking with scientific expertise, while Bad Man keeps ignoring her, patronizing her, interrupting her, and then initiating unwanted physical contact.
Elena, you're much too smart to keep pushing this forward, aren't you?
We get it! He's an asshole! Are you gonna make a character out of him, or just keep on hammering unlikable tropes in?
You dropped something.
Oh, no, that's not mine.
Well, I don't litter, so it must be yours.
Yeah, littering and dropping something is not exactly synonymous. This is just assholery for the sake of assholery. I'm still searching for a likable character amid all this. Bosley is given a surprise retirement party.
I even put together a little walk down memory lane.
The film shows us Patrick Stewart photoshopped into a series of pictures with previous angels in a lazy attempt to tie it into the wider universe. And in doing so, it completely retcons Bill Murray's version of the character. That wasn't necessary at all, especially considering the fact that this film establishes the title of Bosley as being a position inside the organization. So, to be a bit hyperbolic for a second, this is kind of just a fuck you to fans of the original movie. And they also don't make any mention of Bernie Mac's iteration of the character, even though he was one of the highlights of Full Throttle. So for a film which kind of has a bit of a political agenda that seems to think it's being progressive, they have no problem just completely writing out the existence of a key African-American character in the franchise. Nothing else happens in this scene. Bosley just gets his retirement watch before we go back to New Girl, who is at a company presentation on an innovative new power source known as Callisto.
In the spirit of full disclosure, I should mention one small thing. It can be manufactured in pastel colors for the ladies.
Jimon Hwansu Bosley arranges a meeting with New Girl to assist her in bringing attention to an overlooked flaw in the Callisto device.
All my reports, all my data.
We end up getting a very conventionally average fight scene. Ella Balinski shows off the fact that she kicks plenty of ass, but neither the choreography nor the editing really showcase her skills to the best of her capacity. This evolves into a very average and unremarkable car chase. The action in this movie isn't bad, it's just simplistic and unexciting. It involves characters we haven't had the time to get to know very much, and there's very little in the way of exciting stunts. There's just some rev and bang bang until the baddie pulls a Caitlyn Jenner.
Buckle up, buckaroo!
Jane is able to rescue New Girl, but not Bosley.
Who are you?
I'm Bosley.
Bosley.
Bosley's a rank in our organization. It's like a lieutenant.
We can have 3 different Bosleys in this film, and yet we can't make Patrick Stewart's one a different character from Bill Murray's, nor can we mention Bernie Mac.
I'm kind of getting this, you know, you guys are like lady spies and...
You probably could have just said spies, just saying.
Any decent hacker curious or criminal enough could turn Callisto into an EMP on the human body. It disrupts the neural networks and looks like a stroke or an aneurysm, so it can be used without a trace of evidence.
In an effort to uncover what's going on, the Angels team up with New Girl, who has another unwanted encounter with a male character as she returns to her workplace.
You have yourself a good day. And don't forget to smile, yeah?
And at this point I need to just stop and discuss something. Aside from the 2 male Bosleys in this film, every other actual male character has been depicted as such a loudly, aggressively misogynistic asshole. Elizabeth Banks insisted there was no gender agenda when making this film, and yet it just can't help but continue to hit audiences over the head with more and more tropes about misogyny depicted through its male characters. And it's just getting exhausting. And I get it, it's indicative of actual attitudes in our patriarchal society and reflects behavior that women do face on a regular basis that we as men need to be calling out. The thing is, I'm meant to be watching an action comedy. I'm not excited by the action, I'm not laughing at the comedy, I'm not getting escapism from this movie when it should be escapist fare. Instead, I'm just being reminded of the fact that yes, men are assholes. And as much as I agree with that, I would much rather be entertained. Nearly every chance Charlie's Angels gets to make another male character into being so damn unlikable, it takes. And unfortunately, it means that this film is exactly what the critical drinker has accused every single Hollywood movie of being with his aggressively anti-woke rhetoric. And I do not want anyone giving any fuel to that guy. But this is a film that really does it, unfortunately. This movie is so loud on the subject that it drags the film down and makes it a genuinely unpleasant experience at times. And since everything around it is rather average and unremarkable, it's not like I can point to much else that elevates the movie. But whatever, New Girl gets inside to find that the 2 angels have infiltrated the building as well.
If we're in the building when they do their next security sweep, we're all going to German prison.
And then it's schnitzel all the time. Not such a bad deal, actually.
I'm a vegan.
Sabina, you get Callisto from the vault. Elena, you get the prototype from your lab. I'll keep security distracted.
In amongst their mission to retrieve Callisto, it turns out that the asshole boss has taken the prototypes. And we also get this moment where Jane opens a guy's sauce packet for him. You know, counteracting that old stereotype about how the one thing women can't do is open jars and they need men to do it. Not in Charlie's Angels. At least this guy isn't a misogynist, or not yet. After the building goes into security lockdown, New Girl uses Callisto to override the system, but the security guard from earlier shows up. And because he doesn't want to listen to a woman, he experiences a Callisto-triggered seizure. Apparently it actually kills him too, so the Angels killed an innocent person in an effort to get their job done. How nice. Then we're back at the warehouse where we finally get a positive male role model, a cartoonish yoga hoser.
I would love to apply a firm touch to your back. Do you consent?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just let me try to find this.
When it comes to bodily autonomy and boundaries, consent should be at the forefront of everybody's mind. And yet, when this yoga hoser says it as one of his first lines of dialogue in the film, it just comes across as really pretentious.
This saint takes care of our health and well-being, keeps us in fighting shape, you know?
Well, that's right.
He feeds our mind, body, and soul.
Wow, I thought you guys would, serve like bean sprouts and wheatgrass.
Look, eating is all about the intention you put into your meal. If you honor the cow, the cheese is gonna be good for you.
That's not how it works. I'm a vegan, and I would argue that there is no honor in animal agriculture, but considering this film is already so loud about its political discourse, I'm not gonna take the time to get preachy on you right now.
So Fleming tried to have me killed?
Maybe.
He flirted with me.
Honey, a man can love you and want you dead.
Not me.
In the screenplay for this film, male characters are either misogynists or cartoonish yoga hosers. Aside from the Buzzleys and the men who can't open their own sauce packets, there really isn't all that much wiggle room in between.
I need cheese.
Cheese, is that like a code for something?
Yes, it's code for I'm 40 and single, and I have a cheese-sized hole in my soul to fill.
Elizabeth Banks seems determined to make herself the center of the comedic attention in this film, and typically I think she is pretty funny, but unfortunately in this case the film is so downbeat and the script is so limp that I'm not laughing. And considering that Banks was the writer, producer, and director on this film, I do have to point the finger at her for this.
Ralph's dead. I killed Ralph. I'm a murderer.
Oh, no.
Collateral damage.
I wouldn't take that on.
I mean, she did make an active effort to save his life, but let's not downplay it. She did kill him. We get a look back at some of the costumes worn in previous films as the Charlie's Angels theme plays. And this is one of the few moments in the film that I remembered, that's right, this is meant to be a Charlie's Angels movie. We go to Istanbul in pursuit of Asshole Boss. There's a whole overlong market scene where they plant a tracking chip on him, but it feels way more like Ocean's 8 than Charlie's Angels. Granted, I liked Ocean's 8. I thought it was better than 12 and 13. But again, I'm meant to be watching a Charlie's Angels film. I'm not really here to watch a kind of sleight of hand heist movie.
And it seems Mr. Fleming is selling Callisto tomorrow at the Turkish Derby.
The next morning.
Excuse me, who is that?
Ali Hassan, Qatari prince.
Oh, Qatari prince.
Yeah, serious money.
Serious money.
Owns hundreds of horses.
Owns hundreds of horses?
Horses!
After spotting the assassin from earlier, Jane misses with her tranquilizer dart, which causes the villains to get away.
I didn't know you could jump horses.
Oh, she makes a lot of animals jump. Once upon a time, she had a wolf jumping for her. They made a whole franchise of movies about it, and it was just awful. The Angels track them to a quarry where Asshole Boss runs into Asshole from the start of the film.
How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow? Yo!
And it turns out that character's name is Johnny Smith. Yeah, they got as creative with the character as they did with his name.
My employer would like a little demonstration, just to make sure.
You want me to kill somebody?
My employer insists.
That was never part of the deal.
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
Rather than giving us a demonstration of the device, Asshole Boss just gets executed by gunshot. And you know what? It was around this time in the first viewing that I actually found myself starting to fall asleep. I felt no desire to continue staying awake to watch this movie, or even to keep making notes on it. I was just bored into a slumber, and I was very content to just get some rest.
Stay away! I know Krav Maga.
What do you learn? Shopping mall.
Watching it the second time around, I honestly thought this scene was the highlight of the film. The action in Charlie's Angels isn't bad, it's just underwhelming. But in this scene, when we've got all three angels going physically out on all things, this is where I felt something. One of the major highlights of the original Charlie's Angels films was that the characters didn't rely on weaponry. Their action was centered on Matrix-style hand-to-hand combat. This film forgets that and spends most of the action scenes relying on weaponry, but in this scene, we've got all three angels facing off against their own opponents and showcasing their skill sets. And to its credit, this Charlie's Angels does succeed at showcasing the individual skill sets of each of its angels. Sabina is the field operative and the quick-witted one. Jane is the action hero of the bunch, and Elena is the girl on the inside and the tech specialist. They make a good team, and the cast consistently put an effort into both their performances and the action, which I can respect. Sabina ends up nearly shredded, so Elena hacks the system to send in a chain while Jane lets the assassin that killed Bosley get away so she can pull her out. And then there's this nice moment where they're on a cruise ship back to shore, exhausted as hell and resting closely to each other. Without saying anything, this scene shows them all bonding together in silence, which is nice. Once they get back to the hideout,
That's got to hurt. I don't care where you're from.
both Bosleys pop up and Professor X shoots Rita Repulsa before taking Elena away.
I'm crying. I didn't think that you cared about me.
Why?
Because the writers didn't give enough detail to suggest it.
Where's Elena?
I don't know. We have to find her.
Surprise, surprise, John Bosley is a bad guy.
Well done. Satisfying when a plan comes together.
I want to once again say that the title Bosley was diluted in this film to represent a role in the organization and not strictly a person. Meaning that by turning Bill Murray into Patrick Stewart and then making that character into the surprise villain of the movies, it genuinely is a fuck you to fans of the franchise, and not one that needed to be done because Old Man Bosley could have been a very different iteration of the character from Bill Murray Bosley. And you know, in the 1996 Mission Impossible movie, when they decided to make the character Jim Phelps from the original TV series into the villain for the film, it pissed off a whole lot of people, including the original actor who played him, much of the original cast, and fans of the series. Elizabeth Banks decided to repeat history with that one, and also a number of critics have pointed out that this plot twist is kind of predictable because while the film titillates at the idea that maybe Elizabeth Banks Bosley could be the bad guy, since nearly all the male characters in this film are objectively bad in so many ways, it doesn't necessarily come as a surprise to a lot of people that Patrick Stewart ends up being the bad guy. So, yeah.
I've spent an entire career estimating the talents of women. And you, my dear, are marvelously clever. Clever girl. I hope they come.
Phrasing! Sabina and Jane infiltrate a party hosted by the millionaire funding the design of Callisto, and they have a dance scene which finally echoes actually being Charlie's Angels. The girls show off how they move, nailing the routine and showing a lot of energetic flair. It's a fun movement, and Charlie's Angels is meant to be fun. More of this would have helped raise the film considerably. And they continue using their feminine charms to slip through the party, and it works for them.
It's just that I really need to pee. Am I in the wrong place? I thought maybe...
Why are you doing this?
Why? 'Cause fuck 'em, that's why.
Oh yeah, surprise, surprise, millionaire guy is also a douche.
I'm a little confused. I thought you handled her.
You thought wrong, dude.
Right, if you want to bake a cake, you got to break a few eggs.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Langston! Oh my God.
He's been in there all the time.
You hid a person in my Louis XIV? What is wrong with you?
He's a central male character in this film's script. That's what's wrong with him.
No sense of humor, that's your problem.
Neither does the rest of the film, but you don't see me complaining. Oh wait, you do. Bosley leaves Callisto to kill both Elena and Sauce Packet, while Sabina and Jane team up to fight the assassin, and some editing which does not sync its shots up very well, but it does begin to improve when it's left between just him and Jane.
You've got 7 moves, Mr. Hodak.
Dead. Just as Old Man Bosley is about to have Girl Bosley executed, the lights go down and they come back on to reveal a legion of angels having pulled a Bill Cosby on everyone at the party in a moment of solidarity.
It's just business, John.
He's with me now. You thought you made us, we made you.
We trusted you, dick.
Did someone yell timber?
Elena is officially welcome to be an angel, and oh yeah, it turns out Charlie is a girl now as well. Which makes sense, because Charlie is meant to be a good guy. Then the credits roll with some cameos, including Jacqueline Smith reprising her role as Callie Garrett from the original TV series and Full Throttle, as well as Ronda Rousey. Man, remember when she was a thing? Laverne Cox gets one as well, but none of the angels from the movies, unfortunately, but whatever. Is Charlie's Angels a good film?
This is a prescription for no.
Correctamundo, to be taken with food every Saturday night while you're eating alone.
When discussing a film like Charlie's Angels, in particular its approach to gender, you have to walk a very fine line. It's too easy to take the route of the critical drinker and scream woke every 30 seconds, even when there is room for legitimate criticism on the subject, but as someone who identifies as a feminist to the point that I've been called a simp and a cuck and every other term you can think of, I think I can approach this movie with a bit more of an open mindset. I mean, I'm also someone who was an outspoken supporter of the 2016 all-female Ghostbusters movie. I enjoyed this movie. And frankly, I think that film succeeded in a number of ways that Charlie's Angels just didn't. This movie could learn a lot from Ghostbusters Answer the Call. That movie didn't give either Melissa McCarthy or Kristen Wiig enough room to be as funny as they could have been in other films like Bridesmaids or Spy, but it did give us plenty of time to spend with the characters and get to know them, while it also allowed Leslie Jones and particularly Kate McKinnon to steal the screen as the funny ones. They were a solid team. The characters were memorable, and it focused on just trying to be a fun time whilst avoiding any attempt to comment on gender, which in turn gave it progress points for just focusing on being a good film that happened to be female-centric. And by focusing on the comedy, it also meant that it was exactly what a Ghostbusters film needed to be. Also, the action scenes were handled with a lot of visual grace, and I found the comedy to more often than not be funny. Charlie's Angels is meant to be an action comedy, but the action isn't exciting, the comedy isn't funny, and the mood is consistently downbeat enough that it's genuinely a struggle to find the energy to want to laugh at anything. When this film came out, it became a subject of discussion because Banks was very vocal about the film's failure. She felt it was pigeonholed as being solely for female audiences, as well as quoted as saying, if the movie doesn't make money, it reinforces the stereotype in Hollywood that men don't go to see women do action movies. For the record, this film failed because people of all genders didn't show up to see it, but I will support her comments that Hollywood is a lot less likely to produce movies that are female-centric in genres that are frequently male-dominated if they don't make money. She made a point of saying that Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel succeeded because they were part of a wider superhero universe which were already largely male-dominated, and I also agree with this. But unfortunately, the media immediately chose to spin this as Elizabeth Banks blames men for Charlie's Angels' failure. And that largely became the legacy of this film, with a lot of people discussing those comments. But I want to draw more attention to the fact that Elizabeth Banks insisted her movie did not come with a gendered agenda. I feel like that statement is a challenge to believe. Before I saw this movie, I watched a bunch of reviews on it, and the commentators frequently mentioned that nearly all the men in this film are portrayed as bad in an overtly loud fashion. I thought surely that's just going to be reactionary hyperbole, but after watching this film, I gotta say, they were right. I'm not sure if the filmmakers thought it was part of the comedy to make so many male characters almost cartoonishly misogynistic, but I didn't find it funny, and I didn't think it was either insightful or adding of any dramatic edge to the film. It just came across as patronizingly political. Women overcoming patriarchal adversity is a cornerstone of the Charlie's Angels franchise, but this film could have handled that with a lot more subtlety, but instead they went in the complete opposite direction.
Play it subtle, alright? Subtle. Yeah. Play it subtle.
Hello! The original Charlie's Angels movies were silly, campy, cartoonish, and fun. This Charlie's Angels movie opts instead to be way more serious and glum with a more casual sense of humor. The jokes come across as lazy, and the sheer unlikability of so many of the characters seems so intent on commenting on an actual issue that it distracts from a movie that would be far better suited as escapist fare. But overlooking the issue of gender in this film and the fact that it didn't seem like many more people wanted to see another Charlie's Angels film, it's also hard to see anyone wanting to see an action movie that's just this formulaic and unimaginative. Elizabeth Banks shows enough flair as a director because she knows how to frame scenes and wrings efforts out of a very talented cast. But her 30 times rewritten screenplay ends up leaving very little to support everyone with. And the stars really deserve a much better screenplay because they're great in this film. Kristen Stewart perfectly balances the seductive appeal, the action heroine, and the comedic edge of her character with such a wild energy, even if the script often reduces it down to, ha ha ha, I'm so awkward. Ella Balinski is given the least personality in favor of just being a generic action hero, but she sells the role so well with such kick-ass physical dedication. And Naomi Scott shows a lot of charm and charisma. These three stars deserve a much better script, and a film that actually has a sense of rhythm and personality to it. Elizabeth Banks showed a lot more flair as a director when she made Cocaine Bear. That movie lent into its B-movie genre gimmicks a whole lot more, maintaining a sense of horror and a sense of humor which it walked really well. It wasn't perfect, but it was a fun time, it was memorable, and it's something that I would gladly watch again. Whereas Charlie's Angels is either forgettable or memorable for the wrong reasons, but most importantly, not worth the rewatch, or much of a watch in the first place. If you change the title of this film from Charlie's Angels to something that wasn't an intellectual property, it really wouldn't impact the film, aside from actually making it better, because then audiences wouldn't be constantly comparing it to the much better films of the early 2000s. I can understand why the filmmakers decided to go in a different direction to the hypersexualized and cartoonish nature of the early 2000s films, and I can respect them for trying something different. But they made the mistake of not giving this film any kind of flavor. They made it so pulpy and serious, taking the fun out of it, which was the major draw of the franchise. If this was meant to be a continuation of the early 2000s films, there is a way to do that and to make it evolve into something more appropriate for contemporary audiences. I mean, Bad Boys for Life and Bad Boys Ride or Die showed that you can continue to evolve a pre-existing action franchise while taking it away from what it once was. Those movies stopped being Michael Bay-esque, and Adi and Bilal made it very much their own. And I really think that Elizabeth Banks could have done that with Charlie's Angels. She just didn't, and the approach they took really was the wrong one. Charlie's Angels may have some good angels, but it doesn't have a good film to attach them to. Hell, it doesn't even have them doing the actual Charlie's Angels pose. That is one of the most iconic things about the franchise, and they forgot to put it in. Charlie's Angels gets 3 devils out of 10. It may have some awesome stars and its 3 central angels, but with a screenplay that mixes a complete lack of imagination with some genuinely unlikable characters, it ends up being such a dull and downbeat experience that lacks any of the fun that you would expect from a film calling itself Charlie's Angels. And that does it for today's episode of Delightfully Devilish, you guys. If there are any movies you want to see me discuss on this show, please leave them in the comment section below. If you want to see more episodes of this show, please hit that subscribe button, wherever the fuck it is. Otherwise, until next time, I have been your host, Jukebox Harry. Merry Christmas.
She ain't funny. Next!